The tan area on this map, the greater Midwest, that is why the United States is the global superpower and will continue to be so long after our grandchildren are gone. It is the most productive chunk of arable land in the world, more than the next two put together. But as important as that is, it's really the blue lines on that map, the greater Mississippi system, because that is 13,500 miles of navigable waterway. And as you folks know in your industry, moving things from A to B is a bit of a bitch. But if you float it, it's 1/12 the cost. And that is more miles of navigable waterway than the rest of the planet put together. So no matter what happens, the United States is not just going to be agriculturally and industrially rich, but capital rich as well. And that pays for literally everything else. In addition, the United States has mountains and deserts to the south, lakes and forests to the north, ocean moats on either side. In addition to being the richest chunk of territory in the world, it is the most physically secure. So even in the worst case scenario, where somehow there's a third Obama term, and 2 years through there's a freak chopstick accident and Vice President Ted Cruz takes over, and we spend the next 24 years going back and forth between the Clinton and the Bush administrations, you're going to be fine. We can't mess this up. We have tried. Okay. What do we Americans do with this? Well, back in what we think of as ancient history, the world was imperial. The French Navy protected French trade between the French colonies and the French mainland. The Brits did the same, the Japanese did the same, and so on. It was a sequestered imperial system. You did not trade with your neighbor if you could help it, because you never knew when some idiot whose language you didn't speak was going to throw a war, and even if you weren't involved, you could lose access to whatever the raw material or the trade route or the end market was that you thought was so important. Kept things in-house. And if you came across something that you felt you needed, you went out and got it, and you brought it into your network, closed it off from everyone else. These systems competed for resources, for markets, for trade access. Those competitions escalated into wars. Those wars culminated in World War II. Now, at the end of that war, the Americans looked around, realized they were the last men standing, and decided to try something else. Instead of a sequestered system, we would pool all of the world's resources, all of the world's markets, all of the world's waterways into a single globalized network. We called it Bretton Woods, we called it free trade. The idea was that you would be able to sell into any market relatively duty-free and not have to worry about the security of transport. In addition, the United States would open up its market, the only one to really survive the war. At that point, our market was bigger than everybody else's put together. And you could export your way back to affluence. There were a couple of catches, one of which was you had to let us fight the Cold War our way. So NATO, the Japanese alliance, the Taiwanese alliance, these are all military aspects of free trade, not the other way around. How did we enforce it? Not all that complicated. The carrier on the right is a jump carrier. The one on the left is a super. Now, one super carrier has 7 times the combat capability of a jump carrier. There are 10 jump carriers in the world. Not one of them is American. There are 10 super carriers in the world. They're all American. And they're all in the process of being retired to be replaced with bigger carriers. The United States has enjoyed a 10-to-1 force projection ratio versus the combined navies of the rest of the planet for 7 straight decades. And that gap is widening today. And the reason that free trade works, the reason that the world looks the way it does today, is because the Americans have chosen to put that force differential at the service of the global commons and force the world to have free trade. It's the greatest expansion of peace and prosperity in human history. Global population's tripled. Global GDP is expanded by a factor of 10. But never forget that for the Americans, it's never been about trade. It's been about security. We bought up an alliance to fight the Cold War. And as a percentage of GDP, we are the least involved economy in the world. And most of what we trade is with our partners in North America. You are looking at total American exposure to the global system to 2 to 3% of GDP for exports. That's it. and that's going down. So if we ever have a bad hair day, the global system is predicated on American commitment to a system that we stopped using 30 years ago. Not stable, not even a little bit. So that's piece one. Here's piece two. Let's talk demography. This is a standard demographic profile. Children at the bottom, then young adults, mature adults, retirees. It's a pyramid because of simple mortality. Now you can split any demographic profile into three economically interesting pieces. First, you've got your young workers, the people who are starting out. It's all about consumption for these people. It's college and kids and cars and houses and pot. It's spend, 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 spend. But they're at the beginning of their working careers, not a lot of income. So car loans, house loans, college loans. High growth, but high debt. This is your primary end consumer, the young people of the world, roughly aged 20 to 45. Your next group, roughly aged 40 to 65, are your mature workers. They're not consuming so much anymore. They're probably downsizing the house. The kids are moving out. They're at the height of their income, however. They're saving for retirement. This is the tax base. So low growth, but high savings, high investment. This is what funds everything. And then you have your retirees, who can't take the stress, can't take the volatility. They step back from the system. They swap out their stocks and bonds for T-bills and cash. This is normally a strict capital model because you have a medium-sized generation providing the capital for a large one down below. So things like mortgages require your house as collateral. You have to have a business plan to get a business loan. Do we have any Canadians here today? Don't be shy. What the hell is wrong with you people? Because apparently in 1974 you forgot how to have kids. Spent some quality time in Canada. I know you got the basics down. Now you got a bulge here in the Canadian demography in the late 50s and early 60s. That's the capital-rich portion. So tax receipts in the Canadian national government have never been larger. Retiree holdings have never been, near retiree holdings of financial assets have never been higher. So Canada has been able to put into place one of the world's most liberal social welfare systems and still have enough money left over in the couch to pay for the tar sands of Alberta, which are one of the most capital-intensive industries that humanity has ever attempted, and is still going strong. But in 7 years, that bulge moves into mass retirement, and all that money goes away. And Canada will go from being one of the world's most capital-rich economies to one of the most capital-poor in less than a decade. That means no more consumption because there's not a replacement generation. That means no more investment because there aren't enough mature workers. Exports is their only option.